Hello, I'm Ollie. I'm an English teacher from Oxford Online English. In this lesson, you can learn about different types of questions in English and how to make them. Many English learners make mistakes when making questions, especially with word order. It's easy to make mistakes because there are different types of questions with different rules. Okay, let's look at an example of a question. Why did you say that? What does this question contain? Okay, well, let's look. This question has a question word, why, an auxiliary verb, did. An auxiliary verb is a helper verb. It's there to make the question. It doesn't have its own meaning. You use different auxiliary verbs depending on the verb tense, so present, past, future, perfect, and so on. Okay, why did you say that? This question also has a subject, you, and a main verb, say. Everything which comes after the main verb is not part of the question. In this question, it's just the word that. But that's not part of the question. We don't need to think about it today. Now, let's look at question types and how you can make them. Number one, QASV questions. What's QASV? It's one of the most helpful rules in English. If you remember one thing from this lesson, make it this, QASV. It means question word, auxiliary, subject, verb. This tells you how to make a question in English. This rule works really well, and it can help you if you have problems with word order in questions. Let's look at some examples. What are you doing? So, what, question word, are, auxiliary, you, subject, doing, verb. How did that happen? How, question word, did, auxiliary, that, subject, happen, verb. How often does your brother play football? How often, question word, does, auxiliary, your brother, subject, play football, verb. You can see in the last question that the four parts of the question don't have to be just one word. For example, the question word, how often, has two words. The subject, your brother, also has two words. This doesn't change the rule. QASV always works. Okay, our second type of question is yes-no questions. Questions without a question word. QASV is very useful, but if you might be thinking, not all questions have all four parts. For example, some questions don't have a question word. Shall we start? Did you understand what I said? There's no question word in these questions, but QASV still works. Shall, auxiliary, we, subject, start, verb. Did, auxiliary, you, subject, understand, verb, what I said. You can also have a question without a main verb, like, are you happy? So, are, auxiliary, you, subject, happy. Is she here yet? Is, auxiliary, she, subject, here yet. So QASV still works for all of these questions. You just use the QASV rule with the parts you have. If you have two parts, or three parts, or four parts, it's the same rule. 3. Let's look at questions without an auxiliary verb. So, two examples. Who asked you that? Who did you ask? Do you know why we use the auxiliary verb did in the second question, but not in the first question? Well, there are two ways of looking at this. Let's start with the QASV rule. So, who asked you that? Who is the subject, asked is the verb. Who did you ask? Who is the question word, did is the auxiliary, you is the subject, ask is the verb. So, who, in these questions, does a different job in each question. In the first question, who is the subject? According to the QASV rule, the next word after the subject should be the verb. So the next word is asked. In the second question, who is the question word? What comes after the question word? That's right, the auxiliary verb. So we need to use did. Here's another explanation to help you understand this better. If a question starts with who, what, whose, which, or how much, how many, and the first word of the question is also the subject, then don't use an auxiliary verb. For example, what did you say? What is not the subject, so we use the auxiliary did. What happened to you? Well, what is the subject here of the question, so we don't use the auxiliary did. Remember that these two explanations are just two ways of looking at the same thing. So use the explanation which makes sense to you and forget about the other one. Number 4, let's look at indirect questions. Okay, for example, could you tell me where I can find his office? Would you mind telling me what to do with this document? Can you let me know what time we're meeting? Can you see the difference between normal QASV questions and indirect questions? Indirect questions are made with a question phrase. For example, could you tell me? The second part of the sentence after the question phrase is not grammatically a question. That means don't use auxiliary verbs, and the word order is the same as a normal sentence. So, in the example, can you let me know what time we're meeting? The first part, can you let me know, is the question. And the second part, what time we're meeting, is not a question. That's why we say what time we are meeting and not what time are we meeting. For example, direct question, where are you from? Indirect question, could you tell me where you are from? So the word order changes from are you to you are. What did she say? Direct question. Can you repeat what she said? Indirect question. We don't use the auxiliary did. Indirect questions are common when you want to be polite. Number 5 is tag questions. Tag questions are made by adding question words to the end of a normal sentence. For example, you're from Spain, aren't you? He isn't here already, is he? We can finish by the end of the week, can't we? Tag questions are used when you think you know the answer to the question, or when you're expecting one answer more than others. We've already made a full lesson about tag questions, so if you want to learn about this in more detail, I suggest you watch this video. Okay, that's all for this lesson. If you're watching this lesson on YouTube, why not come to our website? You can read the text of this lesson and also practice with some exercises. Of course, we also have many other free English lessons on our website, so it's a good idea to visit. That's all though. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.